Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Pisces Guide to Pop Culture. I'm, of course, your host, TJ West. So, I'm heading out to Syracuse today, so I don't have a whole lot of time to post. But I wanted to bring to your attention two things. One, got a new haircut, always a good thing. As you well know, nothing makes a gay man more powerful than a new haircut. So that's first. But then I also wanted to take a few minutes to talk about the big news roiling the entertainment world, which, of course, is the cancellation of The Wheel of Time. Now, if you are a fan of my work, you'll know that I love The Wheel of Time. I've done interviews with Rafe Judkins, the showrunner and creator of the show. I have written extensively on my newsletter about how much I love the show, about the show's queer sensibility, and how I enjoy how it's really sort of bringing out some of the things that I love most about Jordan, while also jettisoning some of the things I don't like about The Wheel of Time. So I want to talk for a few minutes about why I think this is actually a great loss for us as queer viewers, but also why it's a very significant portender or portent, perhaps, of the sort of forthcoming end of the golden age of fantasy TV. So first of all, I think it's safe to say that The Wheel of Time is the queerest fantasy show I've ever seen, and it's also one of the queerest shows, full stop. I think that it has done a great job of bringing out some of the sort of queer elements that were always there in Jordan's work. If you were like me, not just looking for it, but they're there. I mean, there's the whole premise of pillow friends among the Aes Sedai. There are, all the various permutations of polyamory that we see among the Aiel. There's all sorts of ways in which this manifests in Jordan's work. And, I know that some more strident conservative book fans were not fans of these changes, but for me, they were what made the show so special. And I think that, Judkins and company infused the show with a really enjoyable queer sensibility that I think we're all going to miss going forward, because God knows there's not much that's strictly queer about, say, the other sort of big fantasy productions currently still in existence, like, for example, The House of the Dragon or The Rings of Power. I mean, there was a slight queer subplot in the first season of House of the Dragon, but that went nowhere. Because, of course, Westeros is not a particularly welcoming place to queer folk. And, of course, I don't expect there to be a lot of strictly or straightforwardly queer stuff in Rings of Power, both because of the sort of conservative bent of much of Tolkien's mythology, but also the showrunners. So I don't really anticipate there being many like queer storylines and anything of that sort, which is fine. Not every show has to have queer stories, but if the universe lends itself to that sort of approach to storytelling, then I think it's more than welcome. And I mean, certainly Robert Jordan's world is capacious enough to admit of a lot of queerness. And I think that, whether it's the Swan Moiraine relationship, which was deeply tragic, not Bury Your Gays, but still tragic, or the sort of way in which this show cast lots of beautiful young men and allowed us to gaze at them, I think that you can definitely see the ways in which, the Wheel of Time invites us as queer viewers, invites us into the space of fantasy in a way that almost no other show I can think of in recent memory has done. And I think it's a real loss to us as a community. And I think we're going to be mourning the loss of this show for quite some time to come, in terms of just, I don't think that there's going to be anything that's going to take a chance with queer stories. Certainly not in today's environment, where anything that seems at all, quote unquote, DEI is going to be completely shit canned by the cowards that currently run streaming services and other entertainment giants, which leads me to the second discussion I wanted to briefly have, which is that I do think that the cancellation of Wheel of Time is a harbinger of what's coming. I think that the bottom is falling out of streaming. I think that it's very difficult for streaming services to maintain the enormous budgets that are usually attendant upon fantasy shows in particular. One exception seems to be Apple, who's pouring a lot of money into their sci-fi projects, but I don't know that that's going to last either, given that Apple has also pulled back on a lot of their production, just because the numbers aren't there. And, it takes a lot of manpower, it takes a lot of money to keep these productions going. And when you look at, like, the intricacy of productions like Wheel of Time or The Rings of Power or The House of the Dragon, and, the special, not just the special effects work, but just the sort of material work and the material objects that they have to create specifically for these shows, you can see that it's going to cost a lot of money. And streamers are just cutting back on that. They're just not able to sustain these things. And this has been writing on the wall for quite some time now. And I do think that we had this moment of glorious fantasy TV big budget productions. Game of Thrones sort of threw open the gates. We had the briefly Ascendant Shannara series. We had, of course, House of the Dragon. We've had Rings of Power. We've had Wheel of Time. We had The Witcher. But of those, the only three that are two that are really left standing are Rings of Power and House of the Dragon. And I mean, I like House of the Dragon, but it's nowhere near the quality of either Wheel of Time or Rings of Power when it comes to storytelling. And so I don't necessarily. I mean, the difference is, of course, that both of those shows are drawing on myths and sort of in universe histories as opposed to like straightforward stories. Like the Wheel of Time is drawing from an actual series of novels, so that's also a challenge. So I think what we're going to see is we're going to see a lot of streamers tightening their belts. We're going to see I mean, I could be wrong. I mean, Tolkien and Martin are huge names, but I just don't foresee a future in the next 4 or 5 years when these shows are going to be able to sustain such long runs. People lose interest with 2 years. With Game of Thrones, you had a new season almost every year. You don't have that anymore. And so I think that that's really cutting into the kind of stories these can tell. You have the fact that streamers are cutting on episodes. Even House of the Dragon season 2 only had 8 episodes, and it really, really hurt storytelling as it does in Wheel of Time and Rings of Power. So, I just don't necessarily see a future for these kind of big budget spectacles in the future TV landscape. I think that we're going to see, like I said, a lot of constriction. And I think that, we're going to look back, and I think the book cloaks and the other haters of Wheel of Time and Rings of Power, everyone's saying, oh, well, now AI is going to do it. Well, yeah, maybe, but that's really hard to produce at scale. And also, of course, there's the huge environmental impact. Can you imagine the environmental impact of these computer servers being asked to create a series from Wheel of Time from scratch? Anyway, that's a whole different discussion. But I think I'll just close by saying that we're really losing out with the Wheel of Time getting canceled. I'm very deeply upset with Amazon, who has also pulled the plug on a lot of other good shows, My Lady Jane being another fantasy show they cut off at the knees. So I don't know. Hopefully I'm wrong, because I love fantasy and I love seeing it brought to life, despite all the negative fan reactions that we get anytime a major production IP is brought into the world. But mark me, if this comes to pass, you could say, yes, I heard this from the Pisces Guide to Pop Culture. And I do have a PhD in film and TV studies, so I do know a little bit about what I'm talking about. So anyway, that's all I have for today. I will try to get back to later tonight, but I'll be on the road, so probably not. But I will, of course, be back maybe tomorrow, maybe Monday, once I get settled in. I'm going to Syracuse for a week. So anyway, that's all for today's guide, Pisces Guide to Pop Culture. I will, of course, I'm sure have many more things to say about Wheel of Time. But in the meantime, thank you all so much for joining me. As always, I really love all of y'all and enjoy talking about books and movies and TV and everything, pop culture and feelings. So anyway, that's all for me. I'll talk to you later.